Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're looking at a bleed build. The type of build that'll have you popping bottles in the club like a G6, but instead of bottles it's a bleed procs, and instead of the club it's your Mountain Dew strewn basement. Anyway, longtime viewers of the channel will know that I don't particularly enjoy bleed builds. This is because you're usually sacrificing damage for the hopes of a bleed proc, which is highly latency dependent if you're playing PvP. But today I'll be talking about one specific element of this build that completely changed my opinion on this build type, and now I'm a certified bleed enjoyer. I'm a bleeder, if you will. Today's setup is largely a dex build with a dash of arcane. The ratio of dex to arcane is totally up to you, where an increase in arcane will improve the bleed buildup, and an increase in dex will improve your overall AR. Both weapons have only a C scaling in dexterity, so our AR falls off significantly as we pump up dexterity. For this reason, I chose a 34-50 arc dex split, while further boosting dex to 55 with Millicent's prosthesis. This ensures solid AR on the Great Katana, while also getting us close to the soft cap of 60 on any non-bleed infused weapons we might have. As for our weapons, we've got two bleed infused Great Katanas to choose from. One with Sword Dance, the other with Stormcaller. Both of these do massive damage with their Ashes of War, and have a solid base damage, while also doing about 117 blood loss buildup. But the real star of the show, the weapon that changed my mind about bleed builds, is the offhand Wakizashi. This little dagger doesn't really look like much, but this thing has the same blood loss buildup as a bleed-infused Nagakiba, and it comes out crazy fast. The low recovery, strong two-handed options, and fantastic synergy with the Great Katana makes it a total game changer on this build. Perhaps I'm a little late to the game here, but I never fully appreciated how much easier it is to get a bleed proc if you have such high speed, high bleed for an offhand weapon. For me, this is now a necessity on every bleed build that I run. I will also mention that we've got Beast's Roar as our Ash of War on our offhand Wakizashi, and this is really nice because having a ranged attack can be super beneficial in some situations. However, there are nice combos that come with Impaling Thrust, so that's another great alternative if you don't need the ranged attack. The talismans for this build will boost our AR when we get a bleed proc, boost our successive attacks, which are going to be plentiful with the offhand dagger, and will boost our poise and weight load. As per usual, we'll have two different options for today's fashion. Option 1 is dark yet sophisticated, like a 5th grader's description of a My Chemical Romance album. We'll be menacingly wearing the Black Knight helm to reflect the color of our heart, the Knight's cavalry armor to insinuate that we stay up way past our bedtime, and the gauntlets and greaves of solitude since we've always identified as a lone wolf. Altogether, we'll have the edginess you'd expect from an overpowered bleed build. If option 1 is a little bit too spooky for you and you want something a little bit more practical, I have a second choice. Now, for those of you practiced in the dark arts of min-maxing, you might see where I'm going with today's fashion. We'll be cringe eating a whole can of sour cream and onion Kringles while injecting ourselves with a hefty dose from the cringe syringe. Yes, we will in fact be wearing the dreaded white mask. This is an absolute must for those sweaty tryhards who just need that AR boost that comes when the blood loss happens in the vicinity. For real though, this is a pretty reasonable choice for the build. We'll also hit the very fashionable poise breakpoint of 111 with our Solitude armor and gauntlets, while donning a pair of trusty golden pantaloons. That just about covers the build, but I wanted to mention a few things before we jump into the showcase. We'll be deviating from the usual video format and showing the frame and poise data at the end of the video. Despite my strong feelings that numbers are extremely fun, I've seen a big drop off in viewer retention during this segment, so we're moving into the end of the video and we're just going to try that out. I also wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks that joined my newly released YouTube memberships program. If you're looking for early access to videos or some extra content, or you just want to support the channel, please consider joining as a member. Or if you're looking for a free alternative, just hitting that subscribe button really helps me out. But that's enough groveling, let's move on to the showcase. Alright, so to start things off, we're going to be up against a player that is going to be using a mix of melee and spells, so we do need to be kind of careful about when we commit to our attacks. We might end up eating a gravity missile or a moonveil attack from range. It's a bit difficult. So here we're able to get in a pretty early bleed proc with our offhand Wakizashi, and yeah, the offhand Wakizashi is excellent. Our opponent here does try to set up a frame trap here between the Swift Slash and the Glint Blade, but we are able to avoid at least the Glint Blade. However, we do eat our gravity missile as we're just a little bit late on our running light attack. Here we go again for a running light attack, wait for Moonveil to finish, and now we've got our opponent at quite low health, so we switch to the two-handed dagger, and two-handed dagger is great for roll catches, and here we can get a nice little heavy attack that does finish off our opponent. Next up we have somebody running one of the most meta setups in the game, and that's going to be the halberd with the offhand hand axe. And yeah, we're able to get them to very low health very early, but they're still quite dangerous. And here they actually go for a very delayed heavy and get the true combo between the jumping heavy and the follow-up light attack. And it does a decent amount of damage, but fortunately we had such an HP lead from the beginning that we were alright. Now, our next opponent is going to start things off with a Great Spear and an offhand straight sword. So kind of an unusual setup, however, they will be going for a more usual setup, which is going to be the power stance lances, and we do need to look out for their crouch pokes. Those are still deadly, even though the tracking was somewhat nerfed in a previous patch. Now we are looking out for those crouch pokes and just trying to get in some chip damage, and here we get kind of lucky with our just light attack catching them out of the air even as they were quite far away, and we're still getting in lots of chip damage and chip blood loss buildup with our offhand Wakizashi. And again, just I can't praise it too much. It's so useful. I think you might not think it would be as useful as it is because it does such low poise damage, but it just comes out so fast, and the fact that you're likely going to poise break in 2 hits if you don't poise break in 3, it's just very, very nice, and it comes out so fast. So here we're in kind of a bad spot early on. We're taking a lot of damage, but we do get a backstab and trigger the bleed proc on the first hit, and then we do a very quick swap over to the Falx and go for the L2 as a wake up, and I do just really enjoy the Falx wake up as just kind of a fun option. So our next opponent is going to be Winnie the Pooh, which I thought was a lot of fun, and we are going to shut down one of their Gugs attacks with a jumping heavy, and that allows us to kind of take priority and maintain it with the offhand dagger bleed procs. And our final opponent here is going to be running a shield and a Great Spear, and we definitely need to look out for the fully charged heavy attack on this. It does come out in 2 parts, so we're kind of going to be trying to avoid that. And then we also need to be cognizant of the potential for a parry. So they go for their fully charged heavy. We do need to double roll it, but our second roll sets us up nicely for a backstab. And then we do have double slash on this Great Katana, which is pretty nice for that wake up, and they're at very low HP, and because we know they might go for a parry, it's pretty beneficial to go for an offhand dagger swing that comes out on frame 11, which is very, very hard to parry. Moving on to our Invasion Showcase, we have a group, I believe it starts as 3 and then becomes 5. It's just a lot of people pretty early on, and this trap is going to be kind of the star of the show. It's gonna, frostbite us. It's gonna frostbite everybody. The trap just goes quite hard during this invasion, and I do really like when you have something that everybody knows is there, but everyone's ability to kind of look out for it is going to be mixed, and also like the team coordination is really on display here because the trap can be triggered by the host and still hit the phantoms. It means that they need to kind of be cognizant of when they're actually triggering the trap. So we get a nice early sleep pot, and that's going to get this opponent to quite low health. We go for the Beast Roar, trying to get a nice ranged attack in, but we don't delay our roll long enough for the host's incantation and get knocked to the ground, so that's unfortunate, but we are able to run back down this hallway and just try to get people to be nice and aggressive, and again, we're going to use that trap and do lots of damage in the process. So the fact that we had the option to run down this hallway and trigger the trap was massive for us, and we really had kind of the beneficial positioning in this instance because they were kind of staying on the stairs, which meant that I was always the first one to the trap if I was going to be running down this hallway. So really the positioning here was ideal, and for that reason you'll see me just kind of stay in this area. Now I was experimenting with rot pots rather than regular freezing pots and incorporating more of the hefty freezing pots. I will note that we did just get a successful finish on one of the phantoms with the pressure plate, so shout out to the trap again, just doing work, and their unawareness of those potential little frostbite arrows was pretty helpful for us. But back to what I wanted to say about the different pot choices. I think rot pots are kind of useful, but I think I prefer, I think probably a hefty rot pot and a smaller freezing pot would be the way to go. I didn't really enjoy the hefty freezing pots, just I felt like they were slow and kind of inconsistent, and I really wanted to be able to frostbite people a little bit more quickly and throw out those pots a little bit faster. So here we're able to trigger the pressure plate. Again, we don't get anything to hit, but that massive bleed proc does finish off the blue, and now it's just me and the host, but it will not stay that way for too long. So this time they're the first person to the pressure plate, so we're just going to wait it out, and they accidentally hit themselves. So again, working in our favor even when they are in control of these things, but it takes us a while to try to catch up to the host. We do some circles, and another blue does come into the world, and they've got Reduvia. So we need to look out for that. Obviously not ideal. It's a little bit tricky, but one thing we can take advantage of is the fact that the Reduvia player is going to be stationary during their attack. So they go ahead and run down this hallway, they blow themselves up with their physic, which is ideal, and then as they stand in place for Reduvia, we get them to very low HP, and then just finish them off with Beast Roar. So having Beast Roar on your offhand Wakizashi is really just going to be nice. I really strongly recommend it. If you want to have a soft swap to something with that and then have something different on your offhand, that's totally fine too. I usually prefer BHS on a Misericord for my offhand swap, and really just my main hand swap, my soft swap that is. But offhand Wakizashi with Beast Roar found to be very helpful. Definitely recommend it. Normally I'd use something like Thunderbolt just because it's, again, pretty nice, and I feel like the tracking is a little bit better than Beast Roar. It functions as a projectile, but it just has very good tracking, so that's something to think about. But because the Wakizashi was bleed infused, I went for something a little bit different. So we were able to successfully finish off the player with Bloodhound Fang, and we move on to this next one. Now, this player with the Great Katana is a bit latent, and it took me a couple swings before I kind of understood our latency to each other, and just, got hit by a few of them, but then got hit by the Phantom proc for several more, and we really need to look out for the Stormcaller. Fortunately, we also have Stormcaller on our end, so we're going to be using that to our advantage as they become pretty aggressive. We do see Blind Spot coming in, so if we can finish off this player, we will be quite happy, and we get the bleed proc and the Stormcaller, so now we are quite happy. But kind of as we're trying to run away from the other Stormcaller, from the kind of mage-looking character, we do get hit by the Phantom's attack. So we go ahead and hang out on the stairs, and here you'll just kind of see the Phantom range that comes with this Phantom's Great Katana. We do get a nice bleed proc, so our AR has now been buffed, and we're just going to back off a little bit here and see what we can do. But yeah, we're getting the Phantom hit with their Frostbite, and here the Phantom range tracking just does not really compute to what we're seeing, and we're able to get a sword dance and nearly fall off the stairs there, but not quite. So I was very happy about that. We stay alive for just a little bit longer, and again, we have a player with a White Mask and a Bloodhound Fang. So we're just going to roll in. Could have parried, but we go for the backstab, and that's going to be quite enough. I think we got the bleed proc on the second swing of the backstab, so successful invasion there, and just some GGs. Now here we do see the Phantom just coming in hot and heavy with their Meteoric or Greatsword, so we do need to look out for that. We also have a host that is kind of just throwing out a lot of stuff with the martial arts, and we do take the full damage from their Ash of War, so we need to be cognizant of that. We do really like the fact that the host is really not wearing much armor. We think they'll be very quick to bleed proc, but they are making our lives a little bit difficult. Fortunately, they throw out a lot of swings, which means that they are kind of stationary-ish for periods of time, and we will also note that we do have them rotted, so the lack of armor is working in our favor, with just a quick rot pot being quite successful for getting some chip damage as we're focusing here on the Phantom. So really just throwing out some occasional hits on the host so we can prioritize the Phantom is going to be a good way to go. They're going to back off and heal, and then we get some alone time, and just we can see what we can do with the Phantom. So this is something I'm always trying to incorporate more in my invasions, and here this was really the invasion that kind of made me realize that I needed an offhand Wakizashi with something like Beast Roar. This player was very low health, but they were playing pretty passive, and it was hard to get to them. And what you'll see me try to do here is swap my Misericord over to one with Thunderbolt. First, I switch over to BHS. I think that was an accident, so you'll see me switching again, trying to find the one with Thunderbolt. And really, if I just had the offhand Wakizashi with Beast Roar, I could have gotten that bit of damage a little bit earlier. So they actually had something that was giving them regen over time, so they're getting a little bit of HP back even though they're out of heals. And so it's actually going to take to the Thunderbolt Ashes of War to finish them off. So had that been Beast Roar earlier, that would have allowed me to get in some damage sooner from range, and they wouldn't have regened health, and I wouldn't have taken that hit later. So it ended up being okay in this invasion, but it was really like, okay, there's a deficiency in my build. I want to be able to access Bloodhound Step on my Misericord, and I want to have a ranged attack without needing to, go into my menu and swap my Misericord, which like is okay to be swapping those up, but I knew that I had an offhand weapon that I wasn't really utilizing the Ash of War for, so this was really the moment when I was like, okay, this build needs to change up a bit, and we'll see what we can do. So finally, we have some time with the host, and we get that very, very quick bleed proc since they have almost no armor on. So next up, we have a 3v1 in Belarus, which I always enjoy. We have somebody cosplaying a dragon, so that's going to become relevant later on in this invasion, and I hope you'll enjoy my decision making when it comes to that. We do avoid one of the swings from this Phantom, but they do hit us with the second follow-up, so that's going to be a bit of a problem. And now we're going to run up here and just see what PvE can provide us some cover while we go for some heals. Fortunately, this guy is here, so they're not super aggressive as I go up the stairs. And now we're going to take advantage of this room. So if you've seen some of my invasions in this area in the past, you'll know that I very much enjoy using this room for different pots. So going for the Frost pot can be nice, but the Sleep pots, they are quite strong in this area because they just take up so much of the available space. So we're able to get in a quick swing there. Had I gone for Sword Dance there, I'm not sure if I would have been able to hyper armor through the swings of the other players and catch up to the Phantom that was quite low. So really trying to utilize the hyper armor of Sword Dance can be a great way to get finishes on other players. However, they have now aggroed the PvE here, so we can focus on this Phantom that again has very little armor and is going to be quite susceptible to the blood loss. And here was a very funny moment where they get staggered by me falling on them, and then while they're stuck in that stagger animation, we're able to get the offhand dagger to connect and finish them off. So a very funny like fall damage doing only 2, but the stagger ended up quite mattering a lot. So I just love those moments. I think that's pretty fun. And we know the player that's all dressed up as a dragon has no armor on, so they're going to be very easy to apply status pressure to. We see we got them rotted quite quickly, and potentially we'll get them bled quite quickly as well. Now they're focusing on the PvE, which allows us to focus here on this Phantom. And yeah, we kind of just blender them with all of our different attacks. The mix of Sword Dance with the offhand dagger and just staggered attacks with the Great Katana is quite powerful. So here you can see the begin of our hunt with our Dragon Communion harpoons, treating this player as Bale because he is a menace, and a dragon will be, I think, the way to approach this situation. They're quite low on health, but they are rotted as well, so the timer is kind of ticking. They go ahead and heal. We get one harpoon to stick, but they're not quite dead yet, so we'll probably need to throw a hail of harpoons to finish them off. We avoid their attack and then catch their roll with a final harpoon. So GG's there, and just kind of a fun one. I think sometimes, you just need to enjoy yourself a little bit. When you see a player that's running full dragon, you should, use the dragon harpoons. Why not? So next up, we have a group of 3 here. I believe they were ganking. We go ahead and throw some hefty freezing pots and try to get them frozen. And they go for a lot of the Ice Spear. And Ice Spear is kind of slept on and still pretty strong. And especially when you have 2 players throwing those Ice Spears out, it's a lot to deal with. So we're going to be trying to avoid those as much as possible. The stairs kind of help, and the hallway just kind of helps because there's a lot of corners. We're able to get one Phantom down pretty fast, and we're just going to throw out some rot pots, maybe some sleep pots, just see what we can do to get some chip damage on these players or to improve our physical damage, just because when they're rotted, they're going to be taking a little bit more physical damage, and because these are bleed infused, they're not doing the maximum AR that we could get if they were, say, like lightning infused or Keen infused or something like that. So we do get one player rotted. We need to back off quite a bit. There's a lot of pressure coming in from both the Ice Spear and the martial arts. And we're going to go ahead and back off here. We switch over to our Misericord just to have access to Bloodhound Step, and we get the Frostbite removed from our body. and just kind of need to focus here on this player that's now swapped over to the Great Spear. And here we really do see quite a few of the Ice Spears coming out. So they're quite partial to their L2 button, and we do need to avoid that as much as possible. And this was probably not the right positional play now that I kind of see it for a second time. I think staying out here in the open was a problem. I was doing much better in the stairs, and here the rot does end up paying off. We continue to pressure that player even though we're getting hit from behind, and the rot just kind of does the last bit of HP. But here we do get a blue coming in, and unfortunately we get hit by one Ice Spear. It gets us very low health. We're not in a good area here. We do get back to full HP, but the Dragon Breath is now quite a problem. We just have so much frost damage coming in, and here I was really hoping to get around the corner, did not get around the corner fast enough, get hit with an Ice Spear and staggered into a combo with the attack from kind of the dragon player. So that one was unfortunate. I think had my positioning been a little bit better, had I gone up the stairs or something, that would have been ideal. Had that Ice Spear not had quite the tracking, then you know, we could have successfully maybe won that one. But you know, that's all right. These things definitely happen, and I think it was well fought until it was a big fat L. So moving on, we have some players that are pretty aggressive, and this one I think they got slept mid animation and then fell off because of that. So that was pretty great. That worked out quite well in our favor, and we've got Waves of Darkness on our Zweihander. Just this face feels like it might be useful. It doesn't end up mattering, so we swap over to our Great Katana and see what we can do against this player with the Moonlight Greatsword. We do need to look out for their delayed heavy attack. We go for an offhand swing with the Wakizashi, not totally sure if we'll get the bleed proc, and we do see that they're swinging quite liberally, so we go for the parry and finish them off with a Misericord hard swap. And yeah, it's GG's, kind of makes up for the last one. It's nice to have a finish where you're able to kind of do everything you wanted to do. Now, this one's kind of funny, I thought. Not too much to learn from this, but just sometimes host behaviors, I don't know, they make me smile a little bit. So this player is really into their projectiles. They go for Thunderbolt quite liberally. We need to get out of range so we can focus here on the Phantom that's running the Bloodhound Fang. We go ahead and get a kind of quick turn and burn with the Great Katana, and then get a bunch of blood loss build up with the offhand Wakizashi. And here we kind of see what we learned from the previous invasion where we didn't have a ranged attack, and here we're able to make quick work of the Phantom just with Beast Roar. So the host goes and uses all of their FP on ranged attacks and then combos the out of FP animation into a disconnect. So a nice moment there. Today's poise values are pretty straightforward. The Great Katana will consistently poise break for all of its attacks aside from the follow-up light attack chain while one-handed, and this is consistent with most Great class weapons. The dagger data is a little bit more complex. We'll note that the offhand light attack only does 40.5 poise damage, but the follow-up attack does 63. This means if our opponent has under 103.5 poise, they will get stance broken by the follow-up attack, and you can definitely use this since these attacks come out very, very quickly. We can also appreciate the guaranteed poise breaks on the neutral heavy attacks. Lastly, it's worth remembering that the two-handed running heavy attack only does about 90 poise damage, so this is not a guaranteed poise break unless your opponent has pretty low poise or they're already poise chipped. As always, feel free to pause the video and take a look at these values in more detail, and let's go ahead and move on to the frame data. I wanted to start by mentioning that we'll be looking at the frame data for the most recent patch, patch 1.14. However, the gameplay is from patch 1.13, as I already had all my clips together before the patch dropped. So I hope you understand and you don't mind, but in my opinion, this build didn't rely too much on heavy attacks, which were the major thing that was kind of changed in this most recent patch. So I think a lot of the build information here is still quite relevant. Here we'll be looking at the heavy attacks for the one-handed and two-handed dagger move set. We'll be comparing these between patch 1.13 and 1.14. The main things to note are that the one-handed heavy attack comes out 2 frames faster on frame 10, and that the two-handed heavy attack comes out 1 frame faster on frame 13. Note that these are only doing damage level 1 stun, so, you know, the normal stun length for a dagger heavy attack. Similarly, the Great Katana's one-handed heavy attack now comes out on frame 23, which is 5 frames faster than before, which is a pretty significant change. Now, the real reason this build is so strong is the offhand light attack on the dagger. This comes out on frame 11 and does 96 blood loss buildup. This makes bleed proc so consistent because the attack is unreactable. Your opponent essentially needs to space the offhand dagger at all times or be perfectly able to predict when the dagger attacks are going to come out, otherwise they're going to be hit by it. This also becomes difficult as people will often try to roll in and try to find an opening for the Great Katana swing since they're slower, and then you can just come out swinging with the frame 11 offhand dagger and do massive blood loss buildup. The running light comes out on frame 19 and has significantly more recovery than the neutral light attack, which comes out on frame 17. The crouch attack comes out on frame 17 as well, and has slightly worse recovery when compared to the neutral light attack. That's going to cover everything I wanted to say about today's build. As always, thank you for watching, thank you to my YouTube members for supporting the channel, and I hope you have a good day.